Hello everybody, it is Wednesday, the 5th of October. It is the day of Yom Kippur, and well, according to God, if I do any work on this day, I shall be forever divided from my people. Well, to hell with God and his judgment. So I will do my work. I shall follow the light of my own conscience. Now, I want to talk about Cain and Abel. And this story was brought to my awareness again just recently when I was listening to Jordan Peterson, who gave an interview in which this story was discussed. You know, and Jordan Peterson is such a leading light in humanity at the moment, isn't he? Lots of followers. He's got great insight into humanity. So he was talking about Cain and Abel and seeing, or rather not seeing maybe, but saying there were two perspectives there. Obviously there were two perspectives there. There was the perspective of Cain, of himself, and the perspective of God, the judgment of God. And although Jordan Peterson said that from a human perspective, this judgment did not seem just, as Cain, in his human perspective, said this is not just. I've worked, I've done all my work, and even Jordan Peterson did acknowledge that. You know, he did work, and he gave a sacrifice as was expected of him. Yet it wasn't rewarded. So that seems unjust. But in the very next breath, Jordan Peterson took the side of God. So God is the higher judgment. Yeah? God is right, and if God says something is lacking in Cain, then there is something lacking in Cain. It's his fault. There's no question about it. We must adhere to the higher authority and accept its judgment. And that is something that is now a ground rule, a baseline rule inside of it. That is part of our foundation. This became part of our foundation, this perception. And we act unconsciously according to it. As I said, there were two different opinions there. And you see out of what were these opinions grown out of? Cain's own opinion was grown out of the knowledge that he had done his best. He'd worked his butt off, as good as he could, and he brought a sacrifice. So he had done the best he could do. Cain was being tested at that moment because God's judgment is growing out of the will, I want to have dominion. My just judgment must be accepted. My will must be done. And the fact that Cain felt resentment meant he was not fully acquiescent. And that was what was lacking from the perspective of God. The full acquiescence. Cain was tested whether he would fully acquiesce to God's judgment over him, and he didn't. His own judgment of himself spoke against it. So that is what was lacking from the perspective of God, full acquiescence. And if we understand that, if we understand where the judgment is coming from, And when we stand in the light of our own humanity, stand up for ourselves, and say, your judgment is not greater than mine. I will stand in the light of my own judgment, and that is what Cain should have done. That is what Cain should have done. He should have packed up his people and said, to hell with you. And he should have gone. He should have exiled himself. I mean, that's what happened in the end. Although, and I mean, did Cain's people die in exile? Did they need God? Did they need him to survive, to thrive? No. They grew into a people, into a big people. But they grew into the people with the mark of guilt. Whereas if Cain had stood in the light of his own truth and would have accepted that as the rule over him, he could have walked away without any guilt. There would have been no guilt. There was the mistake. Now, in making this judgment that we have made about this story, where we have sided with God against our brother, yeah? Again, we have set ourselves on a path. We've created a ground rule. God is always right. Authority is right. You must follow. You must not stand in the light of your own judgment. See, the reason why Cain could not stand fully in the light of his own judgment and walk away was because he still let God's judgment affect him in some way, which created the resentment. He still allowed God's judgment to interfere with his own, which is where the resentment was created. He should have detached completely. And that resentment led to not going up against God, but killing his own brother. So that the judgment of God, he let it affect him, the light of his own humanity, and it led to him killing his brother. Now, as I said, we've gone forward from that judgment. It's like you're on a crossroads. You're at a fork there. Go one way or the other. Yeah? Let Cain stand in the fullness of his light and let him go. Or accept God's judgment and go from there. We've made the wrong judgment there. Cain made the wrong judgment there. And it led to the wrong outcome. He did not stand in the fullness of his own light, which led to the wrong outcome and which led us onto the wrong path. Now, are we now still in the situation of Cain and Abel? I mean, we are about to kill our brothers, aren't we? Big step. We are on the precipice of that. And we have been tested. The level of our acquiescence has been tested through COVID. Yeah, and we might have been found that this fruit is ripe, acquiescent enough for the next step. We are not in the situation of Cain and Abel anymore, because as we learned our lesson out of this, you must acquiesce to God. The gods themselves have learned their lesson out of it. See, we take our nuggets out of the stories, the nuggets that will serve us. They most certainly do. And you know, I'm talking gods. This is no longer theory. Yeah? In the story, that is theory, that is still a thought. The story of a thought that is interacting. But it has already been translated into a reality because people have become the embodiment of that thought. So it is no longer in heaven. God is here. There are people, the embodiment of that thought, and they are the embodiment of the knowledge of what they have learned out of that story. And I tell you what they have learned looking at that. Yeah? Not only that you need to have influence over the people, so that your judgment must influence the people. They cannot stand in the fullness of the light of their own knowledge. So you must be in there, you must be in their head to influence their decisions. That's first. You must bring them into full acquiescence, or at least, Cain wasn't in full acquiescence and he still killed his brother. The influence was not fully, but it still brought him to killing his brother, and that is what they have learned. If we fill Cain with resentment, if we can get into his head, if we can fill him with resentment, he will kill his brother. That is what they have learned. And that is what they're using. Are they far enough in our heads? Have they filled us with resentment enough to override our own knowledge so that we will kill our brother? We've gone further into darkness. We have built we've gone more and more into acquiescence, and they have learned more and more how they can make us do their will against our human nature. We have gone further into darkness from Cain and Abel, a lot further. So that's what's happening at the moment. They've gotten into our heads. Some have, enough maybe have accepted their judgment. They allowed themselves to be filled with resentment against what? Another country? A country doesn't even exist, that's just a concept. Against the people of Russia? They are not a threat to you. They don't want this any more than you do. Resentment against Putin, against one man. And the Russians are being filled with resentment against the leadership of America or Britain, for that matter. Britain very much at the moment. And they will do what Cain did, filled with resentment, overriding their own judgment. They will kill their brother, or allow their brother to be killed. That's where we're at. And that is where the acquiescence, that is the root of the acquiescence. That we misinterpreted that story, or it was misinterpreted for us. It's at least one of the roots, and that created a baseline rule inside of us from which we make decisions. Now, if we were to stand in the light of our common sense, that's all it's needed. It doesn't need to be any more than that, just common sense. And in the knowledge of our own humanity, of our own empathies, of our emotional understanding. If some guy were to stand in the village square with guns, saying, I'm going to kill these people because they don't do according to what I want done, and, well, I might just take what they have while I'm at it, we would have that person removed. Our common sense, our humanity would tell us that guy is a threat to public safety. But if somebody, and I've just watched a video of a Russian guy, you know, and he had this video showing the submarine that can apparently fire a torpedo or something that will create a tsunami. Yeah? And he was showing in this video the effects of the tsunami swallowing up the entire British Isles. And saying, you know, if we fire this thing, the British Isles will sink into the sea. And he was talking about that, like the British Isles were just two rocks that will sink into the sea. I mean, we're talking millions, billions, probably. I don't know how many people there are in the British Isles, but many. And completely detached from that. Detached from the fullness of the reality and detached from his own humanity. That person is insane. That person is insane. And you have the same insanity on the other side, where people can actually contemplate targeted nuclear strikes, you know, and kind of making themselves out to be good. Yeah, no, we don't have to destroy the entire world. We just have to kill a few million here and there. Those people are insane. And it is mind-boggling, because we've only just been through this example not long ago. It's not even been a generation, or barely a generation, since Hitler. And we have examined what happened there, and we declared it to be insanity. Some thought that they were malfunctioning. Yeah? They were insane. We've dissected this thing. The History Channel is still dissecting that thing. And we've declared it to be insanity. Yet the same insanity has risen all around us again. And we're not judging it. Our common sense and our humanity is not judging it. We are again a lot of people are again allowing the judgment of the elites, of the higher power. Yeah? It is the same as God speaking. It's just no longer theory. It's no longer coming from a thought. It is reality. It has come to earth. And it is now full on reality. And we're still allowing their judgment to enter into our heads. And we're still not standing in the fullness of our own light, of our common sense and of our humanity, and act purely out of that, completely unaffected by their judgments. Yeah, no, their judgments have entered our heads. We're working with them. I mean, some of us are still fighting that judgment. But the fact is, it is in your head. It's already there. You're interacting with it in some way. Either it created acquiescence, or you're fighting it. Either way, it's there. And really, it needs to be out of your head completely. You must stand in the light, fully in the light of your own truth, unaffected by the storm of insanity that has been created by them. And then we must see, because they are driving us into fear, seeing there is a threat. You know, the threat is in Moscow, the threat is in Washington, depending on where you're standing. But if you stand in the light of your own truth, And then you see they are the threat. They are full on insane. And they are the threat, and they need to be removed. And then is it for people in the West to remove the lunatics in Russia? And for the Russians, is it their job to remove the lunatics in the West? I mean, that is then world war. It would still be world war. Or if they are our lunatics, are we then responsible for their removal? And is that what our sound judgment should tell us? We are responsible for our own, and we are responsible because we took the eye out of the ball. And they kind of crept in behind our backs when we were unconscious. And we should have remained conscious and responsible. Well, we are the masters of this house, of our own house, ourselves. And that is our own judgment should be the only thing in it. And we are responsible for our house as for our country. And we are all responsible for cleaning our own house, and it's high time we did. Why are people that are obviously insane in charge? How are we allowing that to happen? Again, because of our acquiescence. Because there is a rule inside of us that says you must follow authority. You must acquiesce to the judgment of authority. And it is greater than your own judgment. And that is what we have accepted when we condemned Cain. We accepted that as truth. When we accepted God's judgment on Cain's work and sacrifice over the knowledge of Cain himself, we did not side with our brother, which led to the wrong outcome and set us on completely the wrong path. And we've been going on this path deeper and deeper into darkness, us learning the wrong lessons. We've built on authority. God is right, and we keep building on that. And they're building on the knowledge of us and how they can manipulate us. And we've gone further into darkness. I mean, we were miles away from Cain and Abel. It's infinitely worse now than it was then. We must become I ams. We must stand in the judgment of our common sense, in the judgment of our humanity. And we must be filled with it so that nothing else can enter. No other judgment. And then we must do according what our humanity tells us to do. That should be the judge that we follow in our entirety. That's our light. Anyway, I leave it at that. And hopefully I'll talk to you again, unless the lunatics win. Anyway, see you then. Bye.